Ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to all of you. Delighted to see so many people here for the City UK annual conference this year, and particularly delighted to have a fireside chat with the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. We were both musing as we came on that we couldn't see the fireside, but we would definitely have the chat. We're really delighted that Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, and since 2010 the Member of Parliament for Leeds West, has joined us this morning. Rachel has previously served as Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Shadow Minister for the Cabinet Office, Chair of the House of Commons Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Select Committee, and Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions. And I think it's fair to say, Rachel, you're no stranger to the city, because before becoming an MP, as Miles was mentioning, you worked as an economist for the Bank of England and later Halifax Bank of Scotland. So we've got 20 minutes to have a chat about Labour's new approach to working with business. So perhaps I could just kick off with a sort of an initial question to get things moving. We've seen that the Labour Party recently set out your plan for a stronger, more secure economy. This, amongst other announcements, does seem to illustrate a renewed approach to engagement with business by a future Labour government. Is that the case? And what does that look like in the round?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you, Chris, and with everybody else. Thank you to Miles and City UK for inviting me today. Labour Party, of course, will always be a pro-worker party. It's in our DNA. It's how we were created. But we are also proudly a pro-business party. And I think that those two things are two sides of the same coin, because you can't be pro-worker unless you're pro the businesses that are creating those jobs and making those investments in all different parts of the country. And the city is creating high-paid, high-skilled jobs in all parts of the UK, including the city where I now have the privilege to be an MP in Leeds. And in the year or so since I've been in this role as Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, I think and I hope that people have seen me making a real effort to reach out to business and show that change in the Labour Party and our desire to work with business. I also strongly believe that there is no policy that me and my team can come up with in our offices in Westminster that can't be improved upon through direct contact with business. And so many of the policy ideas that we've developed and generated over the last year, whether that's Labour's climate investment pledge, our plans to buy, make and sell more in Britain, our reform to business rates, all of those have been influenced by those discussions and meetings that I've had with business. Also, just from a very personal level, before I became an MP, I worked in business and have seen the power of business to give pride to communities and a sense of place, and to create those excellent jobs. Now, the City UK report that I think came out today shows that 12% of our economy is now in financial and professional services. Hugely important for the whole UK economy, for creating jobs, for producing much needed tax revenues, and also for export earnings. And the UK service exports, we are the second biggest exporter of services in the world. You know, we should be incredibly proud of the role that financial and professional services contribute to that, because we are global leaders in those sectors. And so, as a pro-business Chancellor, I'm also very much a pro-financial and professional services Chancellor, Shadow Chancellor. For now.
We may say that was a Freudian slip. But,
I often say that apart from the shadow at the beginning of my job title, this is the ideal job for me.
Thank you very much, Rachel. I think that gives us all in this room a great deal of confidence that Labour in government will be pro-business and pro our sector. And I think everyone in this room would want to work with politicians of all parties to make sure that we really drive the FPS sector in the future. So thanks for that reassurance. Perhaps I can turn to the City UK's Enabling Growth Across the UK report, which was published last year. And it does highlight the significant contribution, and you've just touched on this, that the FPS industry makes, not just, of course, in the city, but outside of London, throughout the UK's regions and nations, where 2/3 of its 2.3 million jobs are located. Indeed, I think it's fair to say the industry has a thriving presence in your own constituency's region, with 142,000 jobs across Yorkshire and the Humber and over 38,000 jobs in Leeds itself. So there is enormous potential for the industry to inject investment and boost growth right across the country, including through measures such as reforming the apprenticeship levy. How would a Labour government then work with FPS businesses to unlock growth across the entire country, not just in London?
Yeah, so that's how I ended up in Leeds and in West Yorkshire, because after I worked at the Bank of England, I moved to Leeds to take a job actually based in Halifax, which was the retail head office of HBOS at the time, obviously now part of the wider Lloyds banking group. But I moved to Leeds for that specific job, but also I knew that there was a whole ecosystem of jobs in financial services in that city and that region, and that's really important. And I think that, I think I'm right in saying, I hope this statistic is still correct, that there is a higher proportion of financial and professional services jobs in Leeds than any other part of the country. Leeds relies hugely on those sectors, and we've done really well out of those sectors. Leeds is a thriving city, doing incredibly well, because we have backed those industries and those jobs. So, you know, I listened to a little bit of the earlier panel. I know that people think that financial services is about the city of London, or some people think that. In Leeds, we certainly don't see it like that. We see financial services as a big part of our economy today, and I expect an even bigger part of the economy in the future. And you look at the cities that are doing well around the country, and they are embracing, you know, a whole range of industries of the future, whether that is in tech, in digital, or indeed in the fast-growing, and the bounce back since the pandemic in financial and professional services is also fantastic. But when we talk about levelling up, that has got to include jobs in the service sector being more evenly distributed around the UK. But also, no sector can thrive without financial services, because for businesses to grow and thrive and to succeed, to access capital, you need financial services, and financial services that are located around the country, and to build those connections and those relationships, really important. I think we'll probably come on to speak a little bit more about some of those fast-growing sectors in the economy beyond financial services. But a thriving financial and professional services sector right across the country is really important for creating jobs in those sectors, but also for supporting the wider economy. You know, 12% is in financial and professional services, but the other 88% need a thriving financial and professional services sector for them to grow and access capital.
Yeah, it's truly a United Kingdom-wide sector, and needs to be supported as such. If I can just say, you know, from our perspective at the City of London Corporation, we aim to promote and maintain London's position, obviously, as a leading financial and professional services centre in the world, and to strengthen our competitiveness as a trading nation on the global stage. So within that wider approach to business that you've just mentioned and been talking to us about this morning, what is your vision for the financial and professional services industry, and how can we secure the United Kingdom's continued attractiveness as an international financial centre?
Well, obviously we can never rest on our laurels, and we need to keep up with the times. But I think we can be confident that through all the different shocks we've been through, including Brexit and including the pandemic, we are still a global leader in these sectors, and these sectors, despite everything and all the headwinds in the economy, is still a growing sector, adding to our national GDP, adding to our competitiveness, and adding much needed export earnings. But we do need to remain competitive, and we do need to move with the times. And it's more than 20 years since I started working at the Bank of England, and the city and financial services has changed hugely in that time. You know, when I started at the Bank of England, I don't think anyone knew what fintech was, for example. Certainly no one had heard of cryptocurrencies. So the sector has changed hugely, and its importance for the UK economy has changed hugely. Outside of the European Union, we do need to look at regulation and how the city and financial services in the UK can be more competitive. And I know you had John Glenn here today talking about the legislation on financial services that we keep saying is imminent, and hopefully it really is now. But one of the things that the government are talking about in that is to have competitiveness as a secondary objective of the regulators. Now, look, we need to see the bill and the legislation when it is drafted and available. But in principle, I'm in favour of that, because the competitiveness of the city and our financial services sector is hugely important for the UK economy as a whole. So subject to what comes in that bill, we will be supporting that secondary objective of competitiveness. And I think that'll be an important thing for the regulators to have there, to be reminded, yes, of course, we've got to have a robust regulatory system. The financial crisis taught us that, if nothing else. But we also need to make sure that our sector is moving with the times and competitive in the new industries within financial services. Yeah,
I agree very much what you said. I think, you know, we want to make clear that competitiveness doesn't mean weak regulation, and it doesn't mean a flight to the bottom. It's actually important to have, you know, robust and fair and pragmatic regulation. But competitiveness is important, and we hope, like you just mentioned, that in the FS bill that we will see the detail of what the Chancellor is proposing in that respect. Perhaps I can move on to a slightly different subject with you, given our time constraints. You've also recently announced prospective measures to boost UK startups. Our economy is undergoing a significant technological and digital transformation, clearly, and not least in our FPS sector. So how will Labour ensure that we have an environment that encourages innovation, invests in technology, and supports the UK's burgeoning fintech sector, which we've been talking about earlier here today?
Yeah, so in many ways, I think that there's never been a better time to start and grow a business, because there's so much change going on, not just in the UK economy, but globally as well. As we move to become a net zero economy, as we adapt to new technologies and opportunities. And so we need to ensure that Britain is the best place to start and grow a business. Now, I think we already are very good when it comes to starting up businesses. The challenge is at the sort of next stage, and particularly in accessing long-term patient capital. I think we could also do much more on utilising one of our greatest assets in the UK, which is our great university sector, to spin out businesses from those universities, because we've got some amazing researchers and innovators in a whole range of subjects at universities. Doesn't mean that they're always great entrepreneurs or know how to turn their fantastic ideas into a profitable business. So I've asked Lord Jim O'Neill and a group of people to do a review for the Labour Party on what reforms are needed to make Britain the best place to start and grow a business, and particularly for those fast-growing businesses that could be such an asset to the UK economy. And asking Jim and others to do that review very much came out of conversations that I was having with business leaders, investors and entrepreneurs, and universities as well. You know, particularly remember a visit to Oxford Nanopore, which is a fantastic business now listed in London. But there are too many innovative businesses who don't see London as the best place to list. There are too many businesses who sell early because they can't access the long-term patient capital they need to take their business to the next stage. So this review is about ensuring that in the decades to come, we can be starting and growing businesses that contribute to UK PLC, and financial services got a huge role to play in that in terms of the access to capital, but also ensuring that our listing system in London is attracting businesses to list here in Britain rather than, for example, to go to the US.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we talked about Labour's approach to business, we've talked about regulation, we've talked about startups. I'd like to move you on now to the subject of climate change, if I may. We've got our own climate action strategy in the City of London Corporation, which commits us to our own operations being a net zero by 2027 and to work with the Square Mile to try and achieve it by 2040. And clearly FPS businesses have an important role to play in supporting the net zero transition through financing sustainable transformation and facilitating investment in green products. So how can we bolster the role of business in achieving the UK's climate objectives and incentivise green investments?
Yeah. So I think in this area of getting to net zero and our obligations, our moral obligations as well, to doing that, in many ways, financial services and the business community more generally are ahead of government in so much of this. I mean, just look at those two targets you mentioned, 2027 and 2040, respectively 23 and 10 years ahead of the UK government's target of 2050. And in all the meetings, whether that's in my office with chief executives or round tables or lunches and dinners that I've been doing, you know, climate change, and not just the risks, but the opportunities that these growing parts of the economy create are mentioned time and time again by business leaders, including in the financial services sector. And I met a couple of CEOs in the insurance sector recently and talking about how the reforms to Solvency II, for example, can help speed us on that way, but also how we can, and it links to the review that I've asked Jim to do for the Labour Party, of how we can ensure that some of those fast-growing, innovative sectors, whether that is in research or in things like carbon capture and storage, in hydrogen, in gigafactories for electric vehicles, how we can access finance. And Labour have also announced, I announced at Labour's conference last year, our climate investment pledge of £28 billion a year to leverage in the private sector investment, very much based on something that Tony Danker has said many times, that you need that public sector catalytic investment to leverage in the private sector investment that we need to get to net zero, as well as providing a regulatory framework to ensure that confidence so that business can invest in those industries of the future. And also to help industries that are big emitters of carbon to go on that journey as well. And I know they want to, and with the help of financial and professional services sector, can make that journey more quickly. So I'm very excited about the opportunities. I do think we have a moral obligation to pass on to our children and grandchildren a more inhabitable planet. As somebody who wants to be in charge of our country's public finances, I know that the sooner we get on with this, the less it will cost. And the Office of Budget Responsibilities say that if you delay efforts to get to net zero by just a decade, the costs of doing so to the Exchequer double. But also, when I think of that net zero transition, I think of the huge opportunities to create new businesses, to bring jobs to these shores, and the financial and professional services sector are absolutely crucial for us getting there sooner rather than later.
Thank you very much. Rachel, we're running out of time, and I'm going to finish, if I may, on a question to you around talent. Because within this sector, we know that talent's vital to our success going forward, and we want the best and the brightest in the industry. And that requires, obviously, an excellent education system to nurture domestic talent and an excellent immigration system to attract talent from abroad. So my question to you is, my final sort of question to you is, how can we train young people for the jobs of tomorrow and ensure that well-skilled people want to live and work here?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about financial services, you've got people from all different types of backgrounds with all different levels of academic qualifications in all a range of different subjects. But the skills needed in financial services, like in every sector, have changed hugely over the last couple of decades. Those tech skills are so much more important, and we need to do much more with our schools and our colleges, as well as our universities, to ensure that people have the tech skills to succeed. You know, when I was at the Bank of England, we used Excel and e-views for econometrics. I mean, the sorts of skills you need now to thrive and succeed in financial services has changed hugely. And we need to make sure that we have enough young people, but also giving opportunities for people to reskill and to get new skills, that we are really leading in that area. The immigration system is also really important. But, you know, one of the reasons why, and actually this isn't so much about financial services, but more generally, one of the reasons why we need high levels of immigration, it seems, in this country, is that we are not equipping our young people with the skills that business need. And I want to do much more to ensure that more young people are leaving school and college and university job ready with the skills that business need. You mentioned earlier on about the apprenticeship levy. I think a lot of businesses just feel that the apprenticeship levy is just another tax, because it is not designed in a way that helps businesses access the skills and the people that they need. So that needs to be reformed as well, not just so that we give young people the opportunities that they need and deserve, although that is incredibly important, but also to ensure that our businesses can use that apprenticeship levy to get the skills that they need to grow their businesses. So government need to think again about how our education system is equipping people so it's up to date with the modern needs of business, and also that we use lifelong learning to ensure that people have those opportunities to move into fast-growing sectors like financial and professional services.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we'd all agree it's been a fascinating and an illuminating discussion with you today. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you. Thanks very much.